Hey, what's up guys? Bajheera here. I wanted to make a quick video for you guys this morning talking about the changes that were made to Arms Warrior Mastery Deep Wounds yesterday. So this is something that I definitely wanted to give a disclaimer that I have not tested this out, with raid gear or high-level PvP gear at max level or anything like that. This is something that I'm just sort of taking at face value of, oh, here are the changes that came through. Here's my opinion on it. So just take that with a grain of salt and understand that things may be different. In the future, they may make changes to this. But in terms of my first impressions, that's what I wanted to deliver to you guys today, because a lot of you have been reaching out to me, asking me what I think. And so here are my first thoughts on this, is that at first glance, we on pre-patch were playing Arms Warrior, and we realized that even if you dropped your mastery from like 60% to 20%, it really didn't change the amount of damage that Deep Wounds was doing like at all. So that was like, okay, cool. So mastery is a stat that we have, but it's not really very important to stack, and going things like crit and haste were more of an option, and actually even better, I would say. So that was kind of an interesting thing, and they realized that as well. And so what they're doing is they're going to do a large increase to how much mastery affects Deep Wounds damage. But along with that, they're also going to be doing a decrease to the amount of damage that Arm's other abilities does to offset that. So that also, they also go on to say that with an average amount of mastery, Deep Wounds is not going to be much stronger after the changes, which I guess makes sense. However, my concern here is that in order to... The big thing is, okay, if they want to make mastery do more damage, that's cool. Or they want to make it more effective in terms of mastery stat, that's cool. But decreasing the amount of damage that Arm's actual abilities does, that ends up feeling kind of weird to me, and I'll tell you why. So, in pre-patch, my main concern was the fact that the one ability that you guys know that I talk about a lot is Execute, right? So let's look and see how Execute will be affected by these changes. So, in the beginning of pre-patch, Execute was dealing kind of like wimpy damage, right? You execute somebody, it does like 5% of their HP. It's not finishing your opponent off by any means, but at least it would apply Deep Wounds, right? And then they did a buff to Execute, where they did a buff to all Arms Warrior ability damage, or all damage in general, by like 3%. And that brought Execute damage up a little bit, and it started to feel good. I was like, okay, yeah, now we're on the right track with this. And so what happens now is they take damage away from your abilities again, and add it to potentially Mastery can now do a potential more Deep Wounds damage as your gear increases, which is cool and all, but then you're left with this thing where Execute and other Arms abilities are dealing baby damage, right? So you look at it, 1 point of Mastery now increases Deep Wounds damage by 10%, and it used to be 1%. So it's like, whoa, okay, so Mastery scales way better than before. But then you look and see that damage of all Arms abilities is decreased by 14%. So a 3% buff was finally bringing Execute damage up to where it felt like a little bit more effective. Like you'd actually start finishing off your opponent with like 2 Executes, right? Because Execute used to deal like maybe 7 to 10% of somebody's total HP on like a good hit, right? And then it was like, oh wow, Execute's maybe going to deal like 13%. So maybe you kill somebody in 2 hits. But now, if the damage of all Arms abilities is decreased by 14%, you're going to be getting back to that situation where you press all your buttons and your rotation, but you never really see anybody's health chunk. It's just super consistent damage, and, eventually something will die. But since you don't do any burst damage, since there's no chunk damage, it's like if somebody gets healed, it's like, well, crap. I guess we're just gonna continue to smack this guy for a while, and hopefully we get some teammates over here to come help me kill this guy. And that's not a very good feeling. That's not what I enjoy about Warrior. I always enjoy Warrior the most when you do get like big chunky hits, like huge hits, like in Kata. Like that was how Arms felt with a little bit of consistently, but huge chunky hits, and that's why I love Fury so much. It's because you'd stack Mastery and just obliterate people. I think that's why I like the Legion Fury. That's why I like the WoD Fury, because you get these massive spikes in damage that are really exciting to see. But the same thing with Arms. Like Arms has been like that for a while, and I think that moving into BFA, we were kind of getting a better look at that, right? Is where it's like, okay, Fury is this death by 1,000 cuts, many attacks, fast attacks, but maybe not the hugest hits, right? And then arms was going to be a slower, more methodical way of dealing damage. Like you might be doing like 2 overpowers into a sharpened blade mortal strike, which actually hits pretty hard. You have to use a lot of different globals to set up these big hits. But if you do that, then you'll be rewarded with some serious chunk damage. And the fact that you apply a bleed on some of your abilities was pretty cool. Now it's going to be like Fury deals damage by doing a whole lot of little attacks, but not that much burst damage. And now arms is also going to be a situation where you're like doing a lot of like little hits, but at least you have like a bleed that you apply, so you don't really require a lot of uptime on your target to still deal damage. But it makes me feel like ineffective as a character in general if none of my hits ever actually chunk an opponent. I mean, like I like the dot style. Like I think it's kind of fun when I play my Death Knight. I mean, this is not what I want my warrior to be. Now that being said, like this is my initial opinion and I haven't tested it out. So it could be the fact that at max level, you know, warriors are effective at dealing damage, and like the bleed that you deal goes through armor, right? So like you know, you're shredding high armor targets as well as casters with cloth armor and stuff. Like you're being really problematic to rogues and feral druids who want to run away and re-stealth, but they have bleeds on them. Like it could be really effective. That's not really my issue. Effectiveness is really just a numbers tuning thing, and that's what they're doing right now. They're just tuning numbers to make warriors effective, just effective in a different way. Because the mastery stat, the way it was scaling before, wasn't really very effective. It wasn't leading to like mastery being a stat you actually wanted to stack, right? The stat itself wasn't very important. The effect was cool enough, but they wanted it to be more of an effective stat. So effectiveness is one thing. You can just make something more effective by adding damage to it. What I'm concerned with is that it doesn't really like feel good, right? And for me, once again, the idea of losing damage on my actual abilities that I press. So I press a button, you see a big number, you see a chunk of their health go away. That feels good. But pressing a button and having their health not move at all, but being like, okay, I applied a bleed and damage is being done, and even if it's good damage, it's like I'm not really feeling it, you know? And it's different than the way a feral druid applies bleeds, right? Like a feral druid will do a couple different attacks, you know, get combo points, apply a big rip, and you know that rip is really going to sting your target, and then you can kite or continue damage on that particular target, or damage different target. And that's kind of like maybe like a satisfying playstyle. But for arms, it's like if you press Mortal Strike, a bleed goes on your target. If you press Execute, a bleed goes on your target. And that's just, that it is what it is. You don't really like see a chunk of damage. You're not going to see deep wounds like really bringing your target down like a rip might. So that's my concern, is that it's going to actually make Arms Warrior feel like less exciting, less fun, because the Legion style of Arms Warrior is kind of like, it's almost like this is being magnified, right? In Legion, as an Arms Warrior in Arena at least, you were going to hit a target, you're going to go through your rotation, you might not chunk their HP that much, but you know that you're going to be applying pressure with Mortal Strike, with, you know, compounded by Sharpened Blade, and just by keeping your damage rolling. And eventually, you know, at times you're going to have Battle Cry to get some crits rolling. In BFA, it's going to be like the same, except even more like that, right? You're just going to be going through your rotation, dealing consistent damage, and hopefully something will die. And I don't think that that's my favorite style of gameplay, even if it is effective. I like to see a little bit bigger hits from an Arms Warrior. That slower swinging, more methodical approach, you know, master of your weapon, where you can set up different types of damage, and you do a massive hit that really chunks your opponents, and you hit them so hard you actually cause them to bleed afterwards, right? They're feeling the effects of the hit for a while after. I like that style. What I don't like is this just idea that you're just only a bleed class wearing plate. But we'll see how that goes. Like I said, it could play out differently. It could be a lot of fun. But that's my upfront concern with this, and I wanted to make a video about it because a lot of you guys have reached out to me to see my opinion on it, and that's my first impression, is that when I think of an Arms Warrior, I think of heavier hits. This is not heavier hits. You like to see that chunk damage, and 2, mastery as a stat may not be it may be more of an issue as like what our mastery does, you know, like in terms of, okay, so these particular attacks apply a bleed, and that bleed scales off your mastery. And in order to make this mastery good enough, we actually have to decrease your other abilities. That sort of signifies maybe a problem with what our mastery does. Like, I don't mind the deep wounds idea. Like, I think it's cool. But having to decrease the damage, you know, that you feel when you press a button and you see a number pop up and you see your enemy's health bar move, to take away that experience to make this sort of idea of what warrior mastery is work, it feels a little bit odd to me. But we'll see how it goes. Like I said, I could end up playing Arms Warrior at max level, which I will, and be like, wow, okay, it actually feels really fun to apply these bleeds, and you know, playing Rend is now viable because you make contact with your target, hit him with a Mortal Strike, hit him with a Rend, and even if they get away from you, they're bleeding, and you're still doing damage, and that feels good. And having Execute be kind of a mobility talent, which is what it is basically, is fine, but I don't know. Because right now, that's how Execute works. So you take Death Sentence, and you take Sudden Death and Massacre, and it's really hard for targets to get away from you because you're constantly charging towards them. But that's not what I want Execute to be. That's not what excites me about Execute. What excites me about Execute is finishing off an opponent. And right now, it just being a mobility talent that also applies a bleed doesn't really feel that good to me. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it plays out. You know, I'm not hating Arms Warriors. I still am very excited about BFA Arms Warrior. I think it'll be really, really cool. Still, you know, looking forward to playing it, getting it geared up at max level. But this particular change does not have me excited, and so I want to provide some feedback on it for you guys. And definitely let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I definitely want to hear from my warrior brothers and sisters out there what you guys think about this this change. But for me, not thrilled about it. Doesn't really have me excited, but I'm willing to see how it goes. Either way, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace!